Long before the internet, ancient empires moved information across continents. This journey uncovers 30 forgotten data networks that powered the ancient world, from knotted cords carrying census data to mountaintop fires that signaled invasions. You will discover the hidden blueprints of global connectivity, revealing how our ancestors solved the same problems we face today. How did a king in Persia receive a message from a distant province in a single day? What secret code was woven into the fabric of an Inca tunic? By the end, you will see history not as a series of isolated events, but as a tapestry of interconnected systems, and you will gain a new lens for understanding our own digital age. What does it truly mean to be connected? These knotted cords were far more than simple counting tools. A single quipu could contain hundreds of strings, each a different color, spun from cotton or llama wool. The position of a knot, its type, and the specific hue of the cord all held distinct meanings. A red string might track the population of a village, while a green one recorded the harvest of maize. But some researchers, like Gary Urton, propose that the system was complex enough to capture stories and genealogies, a form of three-dimensional writing waiting to be fully deciphered. Imagine an administrator running their fingers over these cords, feeling the knots and seeing the colors to recall the exact number of laborers in a distant valley or the tribute owed by a conquered tribe. This was a tactile database, a physical network of information that could be rolled up and carried by a swift runner along the empire's famous road system. The knowledge was not written down but tied up, and only a specially trained class of readers, the Quipucamayos, held the key to unlocking it. They were the living servers of the Inca world, their memories trained from youth to interpret this complex code. How do you train a human being to become a living database? This question finds a startlingly different answer halfway across the globe, where messages were sent not with knots but with fire and smoke. Across the world and millennia earlier, a different kind of network was being etched into damp clay. In the sun-baked river valleys of Mesopotamia, the lifeblood of empire was not carried on knotted strings, but on tablets of clay inscribed with the world's first writing system, cuneiform. These were not fragile messages. Once written by a scribe's stylus, the tablets were often baked hard in a kiln or dried in the fierce sun, transforming them into nearly indestructible data storage. Imagine a messenger not with a scroll but with a satchel of these clay documents, traveling well-established routes between temples, palaces, and distant merchant outposts. This was the Mesopotamian courier network, an early postal system moving critical information across the landscape. At the heart of this system were the scribes, a highly educated class who spent years mastering the hundreds of wedge-shaped signs that made up cuneiform. They were the network's programmers and administrators, recording everything from the vast stores of grain in a temple warehouse to the precise terms of a business contract. Archaeologists have found tablets that show remarkably standardized formats for inventories and legal agreements. This consistency was crucial. It meant that a governor in one city could read a shipment manifest from another and understand it perfectly, a shared protocol that allowed the entire system to function. Some of the most fascinating examples are the Amarna letters, a cache of clay tablets detailing diplomatic correspondence between the pharaohs of Egypt and the rulers of Mesopotamia, proving this network of information spanned international borders. The sheer durability of clay is why we know so much about this civilization today. A papyrus scroll might decay, but a fired clay tablet could survive for thousands of years, buried in the ruins of a forgotten city. This raises a compelling question. If the Mesopotamians chose clay for its permanence, what other materials did ancient cultures use to make their records last? One answer was found not in river valleys, but on wind-swept mountainsides, where messages were carved directly into the face of the earth itself. The Roman Empire solved the problem of distance with the relentless rhythm of hooves on stone-paved roads. This was the Cursus Publicus, the world's first state-sponsored postal service, a logistical marvel engineered by Emperor Augustus to bind his vast territories together. Visualize a relay of horse-drawn carriages and swift riders speeding along the famous Roman roads, each carrying sealed leather pouches filled with critical information. Inside were military orders that could redeploy legions, imperial decrees that could change the law, and detailed tax records that filled the empire's coffers. The system's genius was its network of way stations, placed a day's ride apart. Here, a tired rider and his exhausted horse would swap for a fresh pair, allowing the message to travel without stopping for rest. Historical accounts from writers like Suetonius suggest that with this relentless relay, an urgent dispatch could cover an astonishing 50 miles in a single day. This was not a service for the public, but the nervous system of the state itself, and it required a breathtaking level of organization. Each station had to be stocked with fodder, food, and dedicated personnel, all funded by the provinces it served. The sealed pouches ensured that a governor in Britannia could not tamper with a command from the emperor in Rome. It was a system built on control, speed, and imperial authority. But such an intricate physical network was incredibly expensive to maintain. How did other empires, without Rome's vast resources and paved highways, achieve the same speed of communication? Their answer was not to carry the message, but to make it visible across impossible distances, using the oldest signals known to humanity. A chain of signal towers once snaked across the mountain passes and deserts of ancient China, a nervous system of stone and fire. During the Han Dynasty, this beacon tower network was the empire's ultimate early warning system. Guards stationed in these lonely outposts kept constant watch, their duty to send a message faster than any horse could run. The code was simple yet devastatingly effective. By day, they sent thick columns of smoke into the sky. By night, they lit great blazing fires. A single fire might signal a small raiding party, while 2 or 3 fires could mean an approaching army of thousands. The signals could race from tower to tower, covering hundreds of miles in just a few hours, a speed unmatchable by any physical messenger. But this network was more sophisticated than just fire and smoke. To convey more complex information, like the direction of the threat or the type of enemy, the system evolved. Some towers used large flags during the day or powerful drums at night to create a layered, almost binary code of signals. Archaeological excavations along the Great Wall have uncovered the remains of these towers, complete with platforms for signal fires and storage rooms stocked with dry wood and kindling, ready for a moment's notice. This was a network built on visibility and immediacy, turning the landscape itself into a communication device. Yet this system had one clear limitation. It required a clear line of sight, a geography of high ridges and open plains. So how did cultures in dense jungles or flat, featureless deserts, where towers were useless, create their own rapid alert systems? Their solution was not to build a network of towers, but to train a network of people. High in the Andes, the empires will moved at a sprint. The Chasqui runners were the living, breathing counterpart to the knotted Quipu, a human network of unparalleled endurance. Chosen as boys for their speed and memory, they trained for a life of running along the empire's stone-paved roads, often at altitudes where the air was painfully thin. Relay stations called tambos were built every few miles along these routes. a runner would burst into one of these posts, deliver his memorized message or hand over a quipu to the waiting courier, and then rest while that fresh runner carried the information forward. This constant relay meant the message never stopped moving. Through this system, a command from the emperor in the capital city of Cusco could reach the farthest corners of the empire, covering up to 150 miles in a single day. The Spanish chroniclers were astounded by its efficiency, recording how these runners could deliver fresh fish from the Pacific Ocean to the mountain-locked emperor, a journey of over 200 miles before it could spoil. This was not just about speed, but about flawless verbal accuracy. A Chasqui had to memorize complex instructions and reports without error, his mind a secure vessel for the empire's data. This reliance on human memory raises a critical question for any information network. How do you ensure that a message does not get corrupted as it passes from one person to the next? For another ancient culture, the answer was not to trust memory, but to trust the unchangeable nature of physical objects, creating a system of communication built on standardized weights and measures. The life of Egypt depended not on armies, but on the silent, rising water of the Nile. At key points along the river, priests descended stone staircases into structures called Nilometers, where they carefully read the water level against a calibrated column. This single number, the height of the annual flood, was the most important data point in the entire kingdom. It was a direct prediction of the kingdom's future. A low reading meant drought and famine were coming. A reading that was too high warned of destructive floods that would wipe out villages. The moment this number was known, runners were dispatched carrying the information to central planners. This was a hydrological network, a system for gathering and moving environmental data that governed everything. The temples acted as data hubs, interpreting the Nilometer readings to coordinate the entire agricultural cycle. They decided when to open irrigation canals and how to distribute seed grain, and they calculated the tax revenues the pharaoh could expect from the harvest. Ancient inscriptions boast of pharaohs using this precise data to store surplus grain in vast state granaries, effectively preventing famines by planning years in advance. The entire civilization rested on this chain of observation and timely dissemination, but this system was a luxury granted by a single, predictable river. How did empires that spanned vast, arid deserts with no such clear source of information manage to connect and control their territories? Their networks were not carved into stone by a river, but worn into the earth by the feet of countless camels tracing the paths of trade. The Silk Road was a slow-moving river of information, flowing at the pace of camels. For centuries, merchant caravans did far more than transport silk and spices between Asia and Europe. They carried letters, detailed maps, and vital news, weaving together an informal but vast communication network. The beating heart of this system was the caravanserai, a fortified inn that appeared every 20 miles or so along the brutal desert routes. Within these walls, exhausted travelers from a dozen cultures would gather, sharing more than food and shelter. They exchanged critical intelligence on shifting political alliances, bandit activity, and the prices of goods in distant markets. A merchant from Venice might learn of a new tax in Baghdad from a Persian trader who heard it from a traveler from Samarkand. This constant, informal exchange of data was the lifeblood of long-distance commerce. To formalize these transactions, scribes frequently traveled with the wealthiest caravans. Their job was to meticulously document every sale and purchase, then dispatch reports back to silent partners and investors waiting in home cities. These men were linguistic bridges, often fluent in several languages, translating contracts and letters to ensure a deal made sense in both Venice and Beijing. The famous travelogues of Marco Polo are a testament to this network's power. a written record of the knowledge, rumors, and technological wonders that flowed along these routes. It was through these caravans that revolutionary technologies like papermaking and advanced astronomical charts migrated from east to west, changing entire civilizations. But this sprawling, multicultural network connected established empires. What about the cultures that existed in total isolation, cut off from these global exchanges? Their solutions for managing information were often even more ingenious, hidden in materials we might overlook entirely. Yet in the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean, Polynesian navigators held entire seascapes in their minds using bamboo and shell. These were the stick charts, not maps to be looked at, but three-dimensional models of the ocean itself. The curved bamboo frames represented the deep, underlying swells that flow for thousands of miles, while the small cowrie shells tied to them marked the positions of specific islands. A master navigator would hold one of these charts in his lap, his eyes closed, his body feeling the rhythm of his canoe. He was not just looking at the model, he was correlating its shape with the real, living motion of the waves against the hull. This was a network of knowledge, a data system that connected distant atolls through an intimate understanding of the sea's pulse. The information was not written down, but passed orally from teacher to student over years of rigorous training. An apprentice learned to read the subtle changes in swell patterns, to watch for specific species of birds that never ventured far from land, and to memorize the precise star paths that arched over the open ocean. With this knowledge, they could undertake voyages of thousands of miles, deliberately settling specks of land like Hawaii and Rapa Nui, Easter Island. This was not accidental drift, but calculated colonization guided by an unparalleled environmental literacy. The stick chart was a physical key to a mental map of immense complexity. But if the Polynesians used the rhythm of the waves to communicate with the land, how did other cultures use rhythm itself, the vibration of sound, to send messages across even greater distances? Deep in the forests of West Africa, messages traveled not on roads but on the skin of a drum. The talking drums transformed complex languages into a symphony of rhythms, a network of sound that could leap across rivers and through dense jungle. These were not simple warning beats. The drums mimicked the very tones and cadences of spoken languages like Yoruba, where a word's meaning could change entirely with its pitch. A master drummer did not just hit a drum, he spoke with it, using a high and low pitch to replicate the rising and falling tones of words and phrases. A specific sequence of taps could announce a birth, detail a hunting party's success, or warn a neighboring village of approaching danger, all conveyed with astonishing clarity over many miles. The system relied on a shared cultural lexicon. To avoid ambiguity, drummers often used proverbs or well-known poetic phrases. Instead of just drumming the word for river, a drummer might send the rhythm for the proverb "the river does not flow without its banks," a metaphor for community that everyone would instantly recognize. This was a data network built on shared memory and cultural understanding, where the message was both the information and a piece of art. But sound, for all its power, has its limits, fading with distance and defeated by the wind. How could a civilization send a clear, instantaneous message that could cross a mountain range or a wide sea? Their answer was to abandon sound for the speed of light, creating a network of brilliant, flashing mirrors. The Greeks turned sunlight into a weapon of information. High on strategic hilltops, a network of towers used polished bronze shields to flash coded messages across vast distances. This was the hydraulic semaphore system, an ancient optical telegraph powered by reflected light and precise timing. Developed by military engineers like Aeneas Tacticus, each station housed a central water clock to synchronize operations and a set of movable mirrors. An operator would tilt a mirror to catch the sun, sending a bright flash to the next tower in the chain. The duration of the flash or a sequence of flashes represented specific letters or pre-arranged phrases, allowing complex military orders or diplomatic news to travel with the speed of light. Historical accounts suggest these signals could warn of a Persian naval invasion or coordinate the movement of hoplite phalanxes across rugged terrain, all without a single runner ever taking a step. This was a network of immense sophistication, requiring highly trained operators who could not only align the mirrors with perfect accuracy, but also interpret the complex light-based code. Its greatest strength, however, was also its greatest weakness. The entire system fell silent under cloudy skies or at night, leaving the city-states blind. So how did cultures in regions famous for their fog and rain find a way to send messages when the sun refused to shine? Their networks abandoned light for something far more penetrating, a signal that could cut through the densest mist and the darkest night. The deserts of Australia hold maps that are not drawn on parchment but sung on the wind. For the indigenous peoples of this continent, the entire landscape was a living library, its contents memorized in the form of songlines. These were not simple melodies but epic oral compositions, each verse corresponding to a specific feature of the land, a distinctive rock formation, a hidden waterhole, a particular stand of trees. A person knowing the song for a specific route could, in theory, walk across hundreds of miles of unfamiliar territory, singing their way from one landmark to the next. The song did more than just describe the path. It often contained the stories of the ancestral beings who created that very landscape during the dream time, weaving practical navigation with sacred lore and moral code. This was a network of knowledge where geography and mythology were inseparable. An elder passing down a songline was not merely giving directions, they were entrusting the next generation with a spiritual deed to the land and the practical means to survive upon it. The rhythm and cadence of the song acted as a mnemonic device, making the vast amount of information easier to memorize and recall with perfect accuracy. Anthropologists like Bruce Chatwin observed that this system allowed for an incredibly precise mental map of one of the world's most challenging environments, a data network encoded in rhythm and rhyme that kept culture alive across countless generations. This profound integration of story and survival raises a compelling question for other nomadic cultures. How do you anchor your history and laws to a land you constantly move through without the permanence of cities or written records? Their answer was not to sing the landscape but to carve its memory into stone. Stone monuments rose from the jungle plaza, their surfaces alive with intricate carvings. In the world of the ancient Maya, these stelae were far more than mere statues. They were a permanent public data network carved in stone, erected in the central squares of cities like Tikal and Kapan. Each stela served as an information hub, its glyphs recording everything from the precise dates of a king's coronation to the complex movements of Venus. Priests and scribes would update these stone records, adding new events to a timeline that stretched back for generations. This allowed a visiting noble from a neighboring city-state to stand before Stela D in Kapan and read the exact history of its ruler's accession, understanding the political landscape through a shared, standardized calendar system. The network facilitated a common understanding of time, law, and royal authority across the vast, often competing Maya realms. Astronomer priests used these public displays to share eclipse predictions and agricultural cycles, vital knowledge that governed planting and religious ceremonies. The glyphs themselves followed a strict grammatical and symbolic structure, a universal protocol that ensured a message carved in Paylink could be understood by a reader in Calakmul. This was a slow, deliberate network, one where information was set in stone for centuries. But such a system required immense resources and a stable, centralized power to create and maintain. How did a society without the means for grand stone monuments or the desire for permanent public records manage the flow of critical information? Their solution was to entrust their most urgent messages not to stone but to the sky, using birds bred for a single, vital purpose. A king's command could fly across the mountains. In the vast Achaemenid Empire, where deserts and peaks made courier routes treacherous, the Persians perfected a network of feathered messengers. This was the Paradazish, a pigeon post system of remarkable speed and reliability. Specially bred homing pigeons, chosen for their powerful navigational instincts and loyalty to their home lofts, became the empire's swiftest carriers. Handlers would transport these birds in cages to distant provinces. When an urgent military report or a sealed administrative scroll needed to reach the capital, a scribe would tightly roll the tiny message, secure it in a lightweight capsule, and attach it to the pigeon's leg. Released into the sky, the bird would fly straight home, bypassing the slow, winding paths that challenged even the fastest mounted riders. Historical records suggest that Cyrus the Great relied on these avian messengers to maintain a tight grip on his sprawling territories, receiving news from satraps in a fraction of the time a human courier would take. The entire system was a marvel of specialized logistics, requiring dedicated lofts, expert breeders, and handlers who understood the precise care needed to keep the pigeons healthy and motivated. It was a network built on the invisible pull of home, a biological imperative harnessed for imperial control. But a simple scroll, even one delivered by wings, could be intercepted and read by an enemy. How did an empire ensure its most sensitive secrets remained hidden in plain sight? The answer would not be written on parchment, but tied in a complex language of knots. Carved with the sharp angles of the runic alphabet, stones stood as silent sentinels along Scandinavian fjords and portages. The Vikings created a decentralized communication network from granite and limestone, placing these runestones at key crossroads and trading hubs. A traveler pausing to rest could run his fingers over the cool, carved surface and read a message left by another weeks or even years before. Some stones were proud memorials declaring, "Sigurd raised this stone in memory of his father, a good farmer." Others were more practical, marking the boundaries of a newly claimed plot of land or offering a warning about treacherous waters ahead. This was a public, permanent bulletin board system where the entire community shared a common code, the runic alphabet, to read and leave their marks upon the world. The Rökstone in Sweden stands as the most famous and enigmatic example. Its surface a dense tapestry of runes that scholars believe recounts epic legends and heroic deeds, a form of data storage meant to outlive its carver. These stones did more than just record history. They provided directional cues for navigation, effectively turning the landscape into a readable map. A network of such stones meant that knowledge could be transmitted across vast forests and seas, guiding the next wave of explorers and settlers. But this system relied on the permanence of stone and the stability of settled routes. For cultures living on scattered, vulnerable islands where a single storm could reshape the coastline, how could they hope to create any lasting record? Their solution was to abandon the land entirely and embed their messages in the one constant they could rely upon, the relentless flow of the ocean itself. The rhythm of the ocean itself was their roadmap. For the master navigators of Micronesia, every voyage was an act of deep listening, a conversation with the sea. They were wave pilots, and their network was not built of towers or roads, but of an intimate knowledge encoded into chants and stories passed down through generations. While the Polynesians used stick charts to model the swells, the Micronesians internalized this data, learning to read the subtle patterns of waves as they reflected off unseen islands dozens of miles away. A seasoned navigator would lie in the bottom of his canoe, feeling the distinct bump and shudder as a particular current interacted with the hull, or he would taste the salinity of the water, noting the slight changes that hinted at a distant lagoon. The star paths were memorized with absolute precision, but so was the flight pattern of specific birds and the way certain cloud formations clustered over land. This entire body of hydrographic data was woven into epic oral traditions. A single chant might describe the sequence of wave patterns one would encounter on a journey from one atoll to another, turning a perilous ocean crossing into a memorized sequence of sensory checkpoints. Ethnographic studies from the Caroline Islands detail how this sophisticated system enabled not just survival, but a vibrant network of trade and inter-island migration, binding scattered atolls into a cohesive cultural world. This was a data network built on sensory acuity and communal learning, where the most vital coordinates were stored not in a book but in a song. For cultures navigating the vast, trackless ocean, this sensory connection to the environment was everything. But how did inland cultures traversing the immense and featureless expanse of deserts manage to encode their spatial data into the landscape? Their solution was not to read the waves, but to build silent, permanent guides from the very stones beneath their feet. A young sapling was carefully bent and tied, trained over decades to grow into a permanent, living signpost. Across North America, Native American tribes shaped trail marker trees, creating a silent, organic network that guided travelers through dense, trackless wilderness. These were not random deformities, but deliberately cultivated forms. A tree with a sharp bend at its base might point directly toward a nearby river crossing. A distinctive knot or a particular fork in its branches could signal a hidden path to a sacred burial ground or a rich hunting area. This was a data system grown from the earth itself, its language written in wood and leaf. Elders held the key to this arboreal code, passing down the knowledge of how to read each unique shape to the younger generation. This ensured that a hunter from one band could follow the trail markers left by another tribe and find his way to safety or a seasonal gathering. Early European settlers and explorers often wrote in their journals of relying on these strangely shaped trees to navigate territories where no European maps existed. The system represented a profound partnership with the natural world, manipulating the growth of trees not to clear the land, but to communicate across it, turning the entire forest into a readable map. This deep integration of data within the living landscape makes you wonder, how did other cultures project their messages not into the trees but high above them, creating signals that could be seen for miles? Their answer was to turn the sky itself into a message board with a network of smoke and fire. Columns of smoke rose from the Great Plains like urgent, silent voices. A lone scout perched on a high butte would build a small, hot fire and, using a blanket, manipulate the smoke into a series of distinct puffs. One puff might signal attention, while 3 rapid puffs could mean danger or the sighting of an enemy war party. The system was a sophisticated visual language, understood by many different tribes across the vast grasslands. A hunter could send a message about the location of a bison herd, its size and direction of travel encoded in the rhythm of the smoke, allowing distant bands to coordinate a massive communal hunt. Explorers like Meriwether Lewis and William Clark documented their awe at the speed and precision of this network, noting how signals could relay information across dozens of miles in mere minutes, far faster than any rider. The code was not universal, but shared enough among neighboring groups to facilitate trade, warn of common threats, and announce large gatherings. This was a network built on visibility and a shared understanding of the landscape, where the sky itself became the medium. Yet its greatest strength was also its primary limitation. The system was useless in the rain, ineffective at night, and impossible in the dense, closed canopy of a forest. So how did cultures surrounded by towering trees, where the sky was rarely visible, create their own rapid alert system? Their answer was to abandon the sky for the power of sound, creating a network of messages that traveled through the woodlands on the skin of a drum. The Pochteca merchant moved through a bustling marketplace, his outward appearance that of a simple trader in feathers and cacao. But his true cargo was far more valuable than any luxury good. It was information. These Aztec merchant spies formed a clandestine network that stretched across Mesoamerica, their trade routes doubling as intelligence-gathering missions for the empire. As they traveled from city to city, they quietly noted everything: the strength of local garrisons, the mood of the population, the political alliances taking shape. They were the eyes and ears of the Aztec state, operating under the perfect cover of commerce. Upon returning to Tenochtitlan, they did not deliver written reports. Instead, they used a sophisticated system of coded language and memorized details to brief special judges who served the emperor directly. A casual mention of the price of jade in a rival city might secretly indicate its ruler's wealth and military readiness. A story about poor harvests in a distant region was really a warning of potential unrest. The Spanish chronicler Bernardino de Sahagún recorded how the Pochteca provided crucial advance warning of enemy movements, allowing the Aztec military to prepare for conflicts before they even began. These merchants were so vital to state security that they operated under their own strict guilds and codes of conduct, with severe punishments for any member who betrayed their secrets or failed in their duty. This entire system was a masterclass in information security, blending economic activity with high-level espionage. It demonstrates a universal challenge for any ancient data network: how to protect your most sensitive information from falling into the wrong hands. For another civilization, the solution was not to hide messages in speech, but to weave them directly into the fabric of their clothing. A king's identity was woven into the very fabric he wore. In the high Andes, long before the Inca, elite individuals wrapped themselves in a visual language of power and belief. These were the Tocapu textiles, garments and tapestries covered in small, intricate geometric squares, each a perfect burst of color and shape. To the untrained eye, they were simply beautiful patterns, but for those initiated into their meaning, these designs were a sophisticated non-verbal code, a wearable data network broadcasting information about the wearer's social rank, their specific ethnic group, and their place in the cosmos. A diamond shape might reference the earth, while a stepped spiral could symbolize the sacred mountain, all rendered in colors derived from rare plants and minerals. The weaver was not just an artist but a scribe, carefully selecting and arranging these symbols to convey complex messages without a single spoken word. Scholars such as Tom Cummins have studied these textiles in depth, proposing that certain recurring Tocapu designs may have functioned like a syllabic or numeric system. A specific arrangement of squares on a royal tunic could effectively display the king's lineage, a heraldry of woven geometry that declared his right to rule to anyone who could read the patterns. This was data storage of the most elegant kind, integrated into daily life and ceremonial dress. The fabric itself became the medium, durable and portable, carrying its encoded messages across the empire and through time. Yet this system of woven codes raises a fascinating parallel. If the peoples of the Andes recorded complex information in textiles, how did another great civilization, separated by an ocean, achieve a similar feat without a written language? Their solution was not to weave patterns but to tie knots, creating a three-dimensional data system of astonishing complexity. The first contracts were not written on tablets but sealed inside them. In the bustling markets of ancient Mesopotamia, long before cuneiform script covered clay, administrators used a different system to track the flow of goods. They fashioned small, geometric tokens from clay, each shape representing a specific commodity. A cone might stand for a small measure of grain, a sphere for a larger quantity, and a tetrahedron for a jar of oil. These were not mere toys, they were the fundamental units of an entire economic data network. To secure a transaction, a scribe would place a collection of these tokens inside a hollow clay ball called a bulla. Then, while the clay was still soft, they would roll their personal cylinder seal across the surface, creating a unique, tamper-proof container. This sealed ball was a contract, a receipt, and a database all in one. If a dispute arose, the parties could break the bulla open and count the tokens inside to verify what was owed. The system's genius was its standardization. A token for a sheep found in the Temple of Yauroch meant the same thing as a token for a sheep in the city of creating a shared economic language across the region. This network of tangible numbers allowed for the management of vast agricultural surpluses and complex tax systems, forming the backbone of the world's first cities. But the true revolution came when a scribe, perhaps tired of constantly breaking seals to check contents, had a brilliant idea. Before sealing the tokens away, they pressed each one firmly into the outside of the wet clay ball. The impression itself became the record, making the physical token inside redundant. Over time, these impressions were stylized into wedge-shaped marks on flat tablets, evolving directly into the first written script cuneiform. The entire written word, therefore, began not with poetry but with accounting, a data network made literal. This tangible system of clay and seals managed complex data without a single written word. How then did a culture without clay, without tokens, without any physical records at all, manage to preserve the most critical data of all, its own history and laws for centuries? Their network was not stored in a temple archive, but in the memory of a poet recited to the rhythm of a stringed instrument. The poet's memory was a fortress for an entire civilization. Across the scattered city-states of ancient Greece, traveling bards recited epic poems like the Iliad and the Odyssey, their voices weaving a vast oral network that preserved history, genealogy, and cultural lore. These were not simple storytellers, they were highly trained data specialists. From a young age, they mastered complex mnemonic devices, using the rigid structure of dactylic hexameter and the repetition of resonant phrases like rosy-fingered dawn to lock thousands of lines of verse into perfect, retrievable order. A single bard could carry the entire story of the Trojan War, the names of heroes and their lineages, and the complex moral codes of honor and hospitality, all without a single written note. The scholar Milman Parry studied this living tradition in the 20th century, demonstrating how these formulaic building blocks allowed for both flawless preservation and creative improvisation, ensuring the epic remained vibrant and accurate as it passed from one generation to the next. In a world without widespread literacy, the bard was a living library, and his performance was a public data download, blending high entertainment with essential education for the entire community. This system of oral storage was phenomenally successful, preserving these foundational texts for centuries before they were ever written down. But such a network relied on the continuous training of human minds. How did a culture scale this concept of memory, moving beyond a single poet to encode its most vital information into a medium that could last for millennia, untouched by human forgetfulness? Their answer was not to entrust knowledge to a person, but to paint it directly onto the walls of the earth itself. Deep within the caves of Lascaux and Altamira, a different kind of network pulsed with silent information. These were not data centers of stone and fire, but of memory and ochre. Across thousands of years, Paleolithic artists transformed cavern walls into vast, interconnected libraries of survival. The paintings of bison, horses, and mammoths were far more than simple depictions. They were a sophisticated visual code. A herd painted moving in a specific direction might map a seasonal migration route. The placement of a red dot could correlate with a star pattern visible in the autumn sky, guiding hunters to their prey. This cave art network spanned continents, with recurring symbols and animal styles found from France to Indonesia, suggesting a shared system of knowledge transmission that transcended individual tribes and spoken languages. Shamans or elders likely served as the network's curators, adding new panels or retouching faded paintings during ceremonial gatherings, effectively updating the communal database for the next generation. Researchers like David Lewis Williams propose that the wavy lines and composite creatures found in some deep, hard-to-reach chambers might map the terrain of altered states of consciousness, a spiritual geography meant to guide initiates. This was a network built on universal visual language, where a charging auroch was understood by everyone, regardless of their dialect. The data was not stored on a portable device, but imprinted on the very landscape, turning the Earth itself into a permanent hard drive of essential knowledge. This profound connection between celestial patterns and terrestrial markers, painted in the dark, raises a compelling evolution. How did a later culture move this knowledge out of the caves and into the open air, using the sun itself as their stylus? Their network would be built not from painted symbols but from towering stone and shifting shadow. A massive obelisk shadow crept across a paved courtyard, its movement a silent, celestial clock. In ancient Egypt, these towering stone needles and the smaller, more portable sundials were not just timepieces, they were nodes in a solar data network. Priests meticulously tracked the length and position of these shadows, translating them into critical information for the entire kingdom. The shortest shadow of the year marked the summer solstice, a herald of the Nile's imminent life-giving flood. This single data point, gathered from obelisks at temples from Abu Simbel to Memphis, allowed for a synchronized agricultural response across the region. Inscriptions detail how temple officials used these precise measurements to decree the opening of irrigation canals and set the dates for planting, creating a calendar so reliable it governed the empire's economy. The timing of religious festivals dedicated to gods like Osiris and Ra was also tied to this solar rhythm, ensuring that rituals in Thebes and Heliopolis occurred in perfect harmony. This network of light and stone required an intimate understanding of astronomy, with each sundial's hour lines carefully calibrated for its specific latitude. The entire civilization pivoted on these precise astronomical observations, yet this elegant system was entirely dependent on a constant, brilliant sun. For cultures dwelling in fog-shrouded valleys or the long, dark winters of the north, the shadow clock was useless. Their solution was to capture time not with light, but with the relentless, predictable drip of water, building a network that flowed even through the blackest night. Water dripped with the solemn authority of a judge. In the heart of ancient Athens, within the law courts and bustling assemblies, the clepsydra governed the flow of words. This water clock was a simple vessel, a bowl with a small hole from which water would steadily escape, marking the passage of time with silent, liquid precision. For a society built on debate and democracy, it was the ultimate arbiter of fairness. A plaintiff and a defendant were each allotted an equal measure of water, ensuring that neither could dominate the proceedings with endless speech. This created a temporal network, a shared standard of duration that allowed for orderly communication across the various city-states of Greece. the system extended beyond the courts. In the military, water clocks regulated the length of night watches, synchronizing the guard shifts for an entire army camp. Even philosophers like Plato were said to use a clepsydra in his academy to time the lectures and discussions of his students, fostering disciplined thought. The device transformed the abstract concept of time into a tangible, measurable resource, one that could be portioned out and managed for the public good. It enabled complex civic and military activities to proceed on a synchronized schedule, centuries before the invention of any mechanical clock. But this elegant solution depended on a controlled, man-made environment. How could a society coordinate the movement of vital information across the sprawling, untamed wilderness where no water clock could function? Their answer was to bypass the need for human messengers entirely, employing the ancient instincts of a loyal animal. A Mongol rider, his pazer gleaming at his belt, thundered into a yam station, the air thick with dust and purpose. He did not pause for rest, but swung from his sweating horse onto a fresh, already saddled mount, clutching a scroll of vital intelligence. This was the Yam System, the arterial network of the Mongol Empire, a horse relay of breathtaking scale and efficiency. Stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe, this network of way stations was meticulously spaced a day's ride apart, each stocked with fodder, food, and a dedicated corps of horsemen. The system's security was as robust as its speed. A rider's pazer, a tablet of silver or gold issued by the Khan himself, acted as an unforgeable passport, granting him immediate access to fresh horses and supplies while denying the service to any unauthorized traveler. This ensured that the Khan's commands and the field reports from his generals moved with a velocity that stunned the medieval world. The Venetian merchant Marco Polo, who witnessed the system in operation, recorded with awe that these couriers could cover up to 200 miles in a single day, a feat that allowed Genghis Khan and his successors to administer a territory larger than the Roman Empire with ruthless coordination. The Yam was more than just a postal service. It was the central nervous system of a nomadic superstate, combining unparalleled equestrian skill with a level of logistical planning that would not be seen again for centuries. But such a network demanded immense open spaces and imperial resources to sustain its relentless pace. How could a smaller kingdom, confined to a compact territory of hills and valleys, hope to achieve a similar speed of communication without the vast infrastructure of the Yam? Their answer was not to build a network of stations, but to construct a chain of line-of-sight beacons, turning their very landscape into a signal fire. The high hill forts of ancient Britain stood ready to speak with fire. Across the rolling green landscape, these fortified settlements were more than just defensive strongholds. They were nerve centers in a brilliant optical network. When a Roman legion was sighted on the coast or a rival tribe gathered for a raid, the first hill fort to see the threat would light a great bonfire on its highest rampart. The next fort in the chain, seeing that single point of light in the darkness, would immediately ignite its own. In this way, a message of invasion could leap across the countryside with the speed of sight, far outrunning any messenger on foot. The system was elegantly simple. One fire might signal a general alert, while two fires could mean all warriors were to assemble immediately. The chieftains who controlled these forts held a tremendous responsibility. Their coordination meant the difference between a scattered defense and a unified, rapid response. Archaeologists excavating these sites have found deep, charcoal-filled pits and stores of dry, resinous wood, proof that these beacons were not makeshift warnings, but a prepared and vital communication system. This network of light bound scattered communities together, transforming isolated hilltops into a single, watchful entity. Yet its effectiveness was entirely at the mercy of the weather. A dense fog or a driving rain could blind the entire system, leaving the tribes in silence. So how did cultures living along the great, winding rivers of Europe, where hills were scarce and fog clung to the valleys, solve this problem of distance and visibility? Their solution was to turn the waterways themselves into highways for information. The great rivers were the data highways of Mesopotamia. Long before paved roads connected empires, the Tigris and Euphrates served as the vital channels for information, their currents carrying the business of civilization on the hulls of slender reed boats. These were not grand warships, but practical vessels manned by boatmen who knew every bend and current. Their cargo was the lifeblood of the early city-states, sealed clay tablets containing everything from royal decrees and tax assessments to intricate trade agreements and legal disputes. A boat pushing off from the docks of Ur, laden with such tablets, was essentially a floating data packet, destined for the administrative centers of Babylon or Nippur downstream. The system leveraged the river's natural flow, using both the current and simple square sails to move information with an efficiency that overland couriers could not match. But the rivers were unpredictable, prone to sudden squalls or shifting sandbars that could capsize a boat and send its precious clay records to the bottom. This constant risk forged a crucial backup system within the network itself. The boatmen often committed the most urgent messages to memory, becoming living, breathing repositories. If a storm claimed the physical tablets, the human messenger could still deliver the king's command or the merchant's terms verbatim upon reaching his destination. Cuneiform inscriptions detail how diplomatic envoys regularly traveled these watery routes, their knowledge of protocol and spoken agreements as important as any sealed document they carried. This fluvial network perfectly integrated the maritime skills of the boatmen with the rigid bureaucratic needs of the world's first states, creating a resilient and surprisingly swift method of moving data across the landscape. But this entire system was a gift of geography, a luxury granted by two great rivers. For cultures rooted in vast, landlocked regions where no such waterways existed, how could they hope to connect their scattered communities and transmit knowledge across the emptiness? Their solution was not to navigate rivers, but to read the messages written in the very stones of the earth. The desert was a sea of sand, and the camel caravans were its great data-bearing ships. For centuries, these slow-moving processions did far more than transport salt south and gold north along the Trans-Saharan routes. They carried the news of the entire continent. The caravan leader was more than a merchant. He was a vital information broker, his mind a repository of fluctuating market prices, shifting political alliances, and the rich cultural gossip gathered from a dozen kingdoms. At each life-giving oasis, these travelers would converge, their conversations weaving a living network of oral intelligence that updated every trader on the conditions awaiting them in distant cities like Timbuktu or Tripoli. Alongside this spoken exchange, written messages also traveled, carefully folded and sealed, inscribed in the flowing script of Arabic or the ancient Tifinagh characters of the Berber people. Historians recognize these routes as the primary conduit for the spread of Islam across West Africa, but they also carried revolutionary technologies, new mathematical concepts, and artistic styles, effectively syncing the intellectual development of North and Sub-Saharan Africa. The network's very existence depended on a deeply encoded environmental knowledge, the secret locations of hidden water holes, and the ability to navigate by the fixed positions of stars in the clear desert night. This system thrived in one of the world's most extreme environments, a testament to human ingenuity. Yet it makes you wonder, how did cultures in the planet's other great extreme, the frozen polar regions, transmit critical data across a landscape of endless ice? Their network was not built on the shifting sands but on the permanent, crystalline surface of the snow. An igloo's entrance, deliberately angled away from the prevailing wind, was more than a comfort, it was a message to any who passed. In the vast, white expanse of the Arctic, the Inuit built a communication network from snow and stone, where every structure and marker held specific, life-saving meaning. An igloo left with a small block of ice sealing its entrance signaled it was vacant but available for emergency shelter. A series of deliberately stacked snow blocks might point toward a safe path across thin sea ice, while a low wall built beside a breathing hole indicated a productive hunting spot. The most enduring elements of this system were the Inuksut, stone figures shaped like humans, standing silent vigil on the horizon. A single Inuksak could mark a food cache, while a line of them created a visible trail across the featureless tundra. Ethnographers studying these traditions found they were a crucial social technology, a way to combat the profound isolation of the long polar winter. A hunter following a sequence of Inuksut to a stocked fishing lake was accessing a data network built entirely from environmental memory and shared understanding. This was knowledge carved directly into the landscape, a language of survival that required no paper and left no permanent mark beyond the stones. But how could a similar system function in an environment that was its absolute opposite? A dense, steaming jungle where the horizon was never visible and stone markers were swallowed by relentless growth. Their solution was to make the forest itself resonate, using a network of sound that traveled through the woodlands on the skin of a drum. A scribe in ancient Java carefully incised sacred syllables onto a dried palm leaf, each stroke preserving knowledge for a journey across the sea. These were the Lonta manuscripts, a literary network woven from organic materials that connected the spiritual and intellectual worlds of Southeast Asia. The process was meticulous. A scribe would take the leaf of the Lonta palm, boil and dry it to a perfect hardness, then use a sharp metal stylus to etch letters directly into its surface. The final step was to rub soot or turmeric into the fine grooves, making the elegant, curved script stand out clearly against the pale leaf. Once completed, the individual leaves were pierced and bound between wooden covers, creating a durable, portable book. These volumes became the primary vessels for moving vast bodies of knowledge. Pilgrims and traders carried them along maritime routes, transporting the foundational texts of Buddhism and Hinduism from India to the kingdoms of Indonesia. Medical practitioners exchanged Lonta books detailing complex Ayurvedic remedies, while royal courts used them to codify and disseminate legal codes across their islands. The network's resilience was astounding. In Bali, temple libraries became the custodians of this system, preserving thousands of these manuscripts for centuries in special baskets that protected them from the tropical humidity and insects. Unlike papyrus or paper, the treated palm leaves resisted decay, creating a data storage medium that was both biodegradable and remarkably long-lasting. This was a network built on a deep understanding of local materials, turning a common tree into a library. Having journeyed from knotted cords to etched leaves, what overarching patterns emerge from these 30 forgotten data networks? These 30 forgotten networks reveal a profound truth about our species. We have always been builders of connections, architects of systems designed to overcome the tyranny of distance and silence. Though separated by continents and centuries, these ancient solutions share a remarkable set of patterns, a hidden blueprint for how societies manage information. One of the most vital of these patterns is redundancy. The Mesopotamian boatman memorized his message in case the clay tablets were lost in the river. The Inca Chasqui runner carried a Quipu but also held the details in his mind. Oral tradition backed up visual signals, and human memory served as a fail-safe for physical records. This built-in duplication ensured that critical data would survive the chaos of storms, wars, and simple human error. Another common thread is scalability. A simple hill-fort beacon fire used by one tribe could be expanded into an empire-wide chain of signal towers, as seen in Han China. The basic principle of a relay runner evolved into the vast state-funded Cursus Publicus of Rome and the Yam System of the Mongols. These networks were designed to grow, to stretch across deserts and mountains without breaking. They prove that the challenge of scaling a network is not a modern problem, but a timeless one. The materials themselves tell a story of deep environmental intelligence. Our ancestors did not invent synthetic mediums, they leveraged the elements already at hand. They used fire and smoke to write on the sky, water to measure time in a courtroom, and stone to carve permanent messages into the landscape. These mediums were not just practical, they were deeply symbolic, intertwining the message with the power of nature itself. And behind every one of these systems stood a specialized human being, rigorously trained for their role. The Quipu of the Andes, the cuneiform scribe of Mesopotamia, the talking drummer of West Africa, these were the living processors and secure servers of their day. Their extensive training, often beginning in childhood, was the ultimate guarantee of data integrity, ensuring that a complex message would not be corrupted as it moved across the network. The most startling pattern of all is convergence. Cultures with no possible contact independently invented near-identical solutions. The relay runner appears in both the Andes and the Roman Empire. Beacon chains of fire and smoke were built in Britain and China. This is not a coincidence. It points to a universal human need to connect, to warn, to trade, and to govern. Data networking is not a product of the digital age. It is a fundamental human drive, as innate as language or storytelling. So what does this mean for us today, living in a world of fiber optics and satellite links? These ancient systems remind us that the core challenges of communication remain unchanged. We still seek redundancy in our backup servers and cloud storage. We still struggle to scale our networks to meet growing demand. We still rely on specialized experts, our programmers and network engineers, to maintain the integrity of the global system. The medium has shifted from clay and smoke to silicon and light, but the underlying human imperatives are precisely the same. From knotted cords to chains of fire, these 30 forgotten networks form a single, enduring story of human connection. They were not built by a single empire or a lone genius, but were forged independently across continents by societies facing the same fundamental problems of distance, silence, and the need to be understood. Each system represents a unique conversation between a culture and its environment, a brilliant adaptation that turned smoke, stone, and human memory into a living web of information. The Inca administrator reading a quipu, the Han sentinel lighting a warning fire, the Mongol rider changing horses at a yam station, all were participating in the same great project, building bridges across the empty spaces on the map. Their collective ingenuity reveals that our drive to network, to share data and coordinate action, is as ancient as civilization itself. By studying these methods, we gain a powerful new lens for viewing our own digital world. The fiber optic cables spanning our ocean floors and the satellites orbiting our planet are the modern expressions of that same relentless drive. They solve the age-old problems of speed and capacity, but the core challenges remain unchanged. We still seek redundancy to protect our data from loss. Just as the Mesopotamian boatman memorized his message, we still strive for scalability to connect every corner of the globe. just as the Roman Cursus Publicus expanded to meet the demands of a growing empire. And we still rely on the specialized skills of engineers and programmers, the modern equivalents of the scribe and the Quipu, to maintain the system's integrity. This history teaches us that the true marvel is not the technology itself, but the human creativity behind it. The medium evolves from clay to silicon, from smoke signals to radio waves, but the ingenuity at the heart of it all is a constant. These stories invite us to look deeper into the past, to see the hidden systems that powered the ancient world, and to recognize their echoes in the devices we hold in our hands today. The past is not a sealed archive, it is a living blueprint. It reminds us that every time we send a message, we are participating in a tradition that stretches back thousands of years, a testament to our unbreakable need to reach out, to connect, and to share our stories across the vast and silent distances. We would love to hear which of these ancient networks amazed you the most. Was it the living memory of the Greek bards, the brilliant simplicity of the talking drums, or the celestial precision of the Egyptian sundials? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey through the forgotten blueprints of connectivity, subscribe for more explorations into the world's greatest historical mysteries.